All right, g'day folks. It's Greg. We're back. It's another edition of the Friday Lunch and Learn. We are going to talk about DevOps a little bit today. We spoke last week about test-driven development and why it's important, and then I pointed you to John Kursky and his pattern. We're going to try and investigate building that pattern for our little financial modeling solution that we are building. But the first thing we have to, so we'll do a little bit in DevOps to get the project set up and then get everything syncing hopefully. And then we'll go from there into PBIP format, and then we'll talk a little bit about financial modeling, which is what I want to cover today. I don't know how far we'll get, so we'll see how we go. Anyway, let's dive into it. So here I am. I'm at dev.azure.com, and then this is the name of my organization, Metro Holographics. This is Azure DevOps. Azure DevOps. Azure DevOps is a very cool and very free tool that you can use, and it's very free for the first 5 licenses, which is nice. Oh, I can't run my Zoom it. Hang on. Come on, Zoom it. We want you to zoom. Zoom it. Shortcut. Is that going to work? Yes. Roll up Z. Yes. All right, we can zoom. Okay, new project. I'm creating just a new project in Azure DevOps. If you haven't seen Azure DevOps before, this is like GitHub, similar kind of thing too. Well, it's more. It's good. It's the old Azure Team Services, Team View Service. Oh, what was it called? My brain just fell out. Anyway, we're going to create a new project. We'll call it Friday Fabric. This is where we can create those repositories. So last week we spoke a little bit about repositories. And we spoke about like a simple version of a what we called a CI/CD pipeline, so continuous integration pipeline, right? And we set it up in OneDrive. You probably remember. And if you didn't, then you can check out last week's video. I don't know if it's up yet, but it'll be up soon. We did an automatic save from Power BI into OneDrive, and then OneDrive automatically synced to the Power BI service, and it was like, cool, this is automatic integration. I only need to hit save, and then it automatically integrates into the Power BI service. And then it was broken, and we didn't bother fixing it because we didn't want to spend too much time. But that was what happened last week. And so that is the simplest version of kind of like the simplest implementation of version control for Power BI. That's literally the easiest way to do it. If you have a problem, you go into OneDrive, you hit version control, versions, you go back to the previous version, you save that, and then it updates to the one in your workspace. Great. So the next implementation of that, the next generation of that, if you're starting to get more serious about version control and you want to do something where you want to track what changes are being made in each version, this is where we start to think about using repos, right? So let's say I've got my report here, my budget versus actual report, and I create a graph in it, a new graph, right? And then in my version control, I want to be able to say, hey, I made a new chart and it's ABC. So, and then when you look at all the versions, instead of it just being version saved on the 25th of the 7th, or version 1, version 2, version 3, version 4, it says it has actual notes from the developer to say what was changed in the version, right? So you're doing version tracking and you're creating notes from the developer inside your version. There's a couple of different ways you can do this. If you're doing the simple continuous integration way, you can create a hidden developer tab on your thing. A lot of people do this kind of thing and they say developer notes. There's nothing wrong with this. This is great. This is better than not doing it, and then you can say GN changed report, and then put the date 07, 06, 2023. Right? Used to do this all the time when I was working in Excel. We put it in like the VBA script or whatever. You have a little, or you have a notes tab, and you just have developer notes, and then you just hide this. No one needs to see it. You don't accidentally add Q&A. The fact that DoubleClick creates a Q&A box still gets me every time. I don't know why it does that. I don't know why they decided Q&A was so important. It had to be a DoubleClick action, but anyway. And then you can say, SG made a new page, 08/06/2023, right? and then that's in your hidden developer notes page, and that's great. That's one way to do this. But if you don't necessarily want to have to do that, then what are your options? And so now you're starting to get into users can, Win just said that users can choose to print hidden sheets, which would be very unfortunate if you had some notes in there which are like, these users are idiots or whatever. Anyway, um, yeah, that could be very awkward. So yes, users can print hidden sheets. So that's not necessarily great for that scenario if you're going to be giving people the option to print hidden. There's lots of, there's probably lots of potentially really bad hidden stuff out there because we do tend to make a bit of a mess in our hidden sheets. But let's say we want to track this properly. We're trying to do it the right way. We're building a development team that is trying to build our budget versus actual report for Aardvark. And we want to build it the right way. We want to make sure we're set up correctly. So then we start to get into the world of Azure DevOps and repos specifically. Okay. So what we want to do, and repo is short for repository, is we want to create a repository for our PBIP file, right? So I'm going to create a PBI, use the PBIP extension, a Power BI project file. And we want to ensure that this repo is then synced to the Power BI service. So then I make my change, I save it to my repo, I commit it, and then it gets saved up to the old Power BI service. Now, there's a few different ways to kind of approach this. And there is a really good, and I put this, I put a thing on LinkedIn pointing to John Kursky, and I pointed you to John Kursky's blog last week. This is this process we're going to be using is the way that he's been doing it. He's the only person I've seen who's really actively blogging about putting DevOps principles into Power BI, or at least there is a few others that are doing similar kind of stuff. But I think his is great because he's a Power BI guy. He comes from the Power BI side of the fence. He's not a developer, right? So like Visual Studio developers are used to this scenario, and people who are being introduced to it for the first time in the Power BI world, this gets pretty complicated, right? You start talking about Git and branches and merging and how does it all work, and we want to step through this relatively slowly and relatively in a way that we can all hopefully understand it, right? I've been using like Git repos for quite a long time, but I never really went deep into them. I use them in very basic ways, right? So I know the basics of how branching and merging and commits and pushes and pulls and all those things work, but I'm definitely not an expert. So I probably will say the wrong thing or get something slightly wrong during this. I'm learning about this just as much as you in terms of how do we use it for Power BI. So just keep that in mind. I'm not necessarily the world's foremost expert in this space. Michael's got a question in the chat, but I'm not going to cover it because it's a bit off topic. Sorry, Michael. All right, but if you are interested, have a chat to him about that. Okay, so we're talking about a Git repository. So a repository is basically a place for us to save our files. Okay, and then it becomes synced with all of our deployment, right? Similar in the way that OneDrive became our repository in our previous example, right? So we saved to OneDrive, and then OneDrive became synced to the Power BI service, and we only need to save, and it would automatically sync on that hourly basis or whatever it was. Cool. So we've created, this is a completely empty Azure DevOps project. We've literally done nothing. All I've done is click on repos. I've not made any changes to it. All you need to know is get set up with Azure DevOps. So that is literally enter your email type sign up. Your organization's probably already got it, to be honest. They might have already used up their 5 licenses. You might need to organize getting access to it. I'm not going to cover all of that stuff. But hopefully you can get access to Azure DevOps because this is the way that all sort of Microsoft-y development stuff is moving into this world. You can do similar types of things with GitHub and GitHub Actions, but it's not set up in Power BI and Fabric yet. So it's like they do DevOps first and then they set up GitHub support because they're pushing their own tool before. Well, I mean, they own GitHub too, so I don't know why they choose DevOps first. But anyway. All right. So what we do is we have now this repo, and this repo is completely empty, right? It's like there's nothing, there's nothing in our thing, and it says clone to our computer, okay? And so we need to figure out how to clone this repo to our complete computer, and we can use a tool called VS Code to do the repository. This is another thing that is useful to do to get your head around. It is definitely a development environment. Let's get rid of this. Sure. I don't even know what that was. Can I say like new project or something? Just new file. Anyway, I'm not definitely not an expert in VS Code, but in VS Code you can do source control, and this is potentially what we want to do. Another way you can do it is through like GitHub for Windows is another option. And there's lots of other different ways. GitHub Desktop. You could do your source control through there. I'm probably a bit more familiar with GitHub Desktop. I might do it through that instead. But the way people like the way John Kursky does it, he does it through VS Code. Okay. So let's see if we can clone this repository down. And when we say clone this repository, it's like create a local folder that we can save files into that then will then sync up to our repository in Azure DevOps. That's what we mean when we say clone. Okay. So we've got this link here. You get a URL that says, okay, I'm a Git repository that is available to you. I'll show you how I would do this in GitHub Desktop because it's probably easier for me to do because I'm more used to it. So here we are in GitHub Desktop. This is a free download you can get as well. Just Google GitHub Desktop. I've actually cloned a repository that we'll talk about a little bit later about the financial report. And you see there's a PBIX file in here already. But I'm going to add a new repository, right? So I'm going to hit clone repository here. And then it says, well, do you want to use github.com or enterprise or a URL? And I want to use a URL, which is this URL here, this HTTPS URL. So I copy the URL and then I put it in here. And it says, where do you want to clone it to? And I'm going to clone it to the Fabric Friday GitHub C users documents type thing. So hit clone and run it. Oh, because I have to do the authentication thing. Oh, this could get something that I don't know about quickly, but let's see if I can do it. Enter the password. Let me just put up, is this going to, let's see if that works. Nah. Any Git experts know what the solution might be for that? There'll be some kind of authentication thing, won't there? Having problems authenticating in Git? Make sure you get the latest Git for Windows. Oh, generate Git's credentials. Maybe this is it. Reg.n, and then look at this password. Okay, I probably will remove this password at the end of this thing because you guys shouldn't have to have that. Anyway, let's try again. Own repository. Oh, that password was really long and I need to, so is the URL, or I'm going to put it in over here. And then get the URL, which is here. Complex things happening. Just ignore the man behind the curtain. Like, retry. Set up user. Here we go. Take that really long password. Hey, it worked. All right, I just needed to generate the password. Or did it? Oh, there it is, Fabric Friday. No local changes. Whew, we got there. Okay, so we generated a password and now we can see that this has been cloned to our local repository. Now you would do a similar thing with Visual Studio Code. Okay, so we could try this, see if it'll work. So just clone in VS Code, open. And it says, where do you want to put it? And we'll put it somewhere useful. New folder. Fabric Friday. There. See Fabric Friday. And hopefully this works too. This looks like it'll be much less. Failed to authenticate. So same thing, right? So we get an authentication issue. So we need to set up the authentication. I think you do this user dash thing. I did see something about this where you set up the user and the password here somewhere, but I'm not 100% sure how to do it. But anyway, we'll just stick with GitHub Desktop. That'll do for now. So we've got our repository cloned locally to a folder here in my thing. If I say show in Explorer here, you can see I've got a folder. It's on Documents, GitHub, and then my what's called Fabric %25 Friday. There it is. And there's nothing in here. So if I create a new text file in here and say hello, then look, it appeared here. Hello.txt. And it says one changed file. So as I create new files and change them, I can then do what we call a commit. So we then save the changes up to the repository, right? And so that via into what we call the main branch, okay? So we've got our changes here, and then down here I can say created hello.txt. In this update, I did a very interesting thing. You could type whatever you like in here, okay? Lots and lots of stuff. It helps to be specific and about what you did here, because you'll regret it later if you're not putting in good updates, and it's considered bad practice, and you get like fired from your development job if you write I updated stuff in your summary there. Okay, so we've committed that change to our branch, but we haven't published it yet, right? And so then we hit the publish branch. So the change is I created a file in the folder. That was the only change, right? So then I publish. This is now going to publish it up to Azure DevOps. Refreshing repository. All good. And hopefully, if we go up to Azure DevOps now and look at our repository, we've got a hello.txt. Look at it, there it is. And we can see there's nothing in it. And we can compare previous changes, and we'll talk about what that is. Okay, so now let me put some stuff into hello.txt. Okay, over here, here's hello.txt. This is an update to the file. We'll save it. We'll close it. Go to GitHub Desktop. It's saying there's a change to hello.txt, and it's showing me the changes that happened. And it gives me this little green situation. This was added, right? And so I can commit this, added some text to hello.txt and commit. And push. So now we push that up to our repository. Now, if you're creating multiple, if you've got multiple people working on these files, then this is where this becomes, say you've got multiple people working on hello.txt and saving versions of it all the time. This is where it starts to come into its own, right? Because you can track all of the changes by everybody, and they're all committing changes, and you can see what's happening to them. So we should be able to then see, and that was AutoGen, right? That's why I had that app.py. Where is my Here, repos. So if I refresh this, there's an update. If I go to comparison, now we can see the difference between our previous update and our current update, right? And we've got, it was blank, and then it was says this is an update. Okay, so you get this red and green -1 +1 side-by-side comparison thing, which is kind of very cool, right? So now I can see as I make changes to files, what's happening in those files as I change them. Make another change. This is another update. Okay, save it, close it, go into thing, made another update in our little commit thing. We commit it up. It shows us the changes that happened. They get committed, they get pushed. So this is more work than just building a Power BI and hitting the publish button, right? There's more steps associated with it when it comes to publishing. And so this is why this isn't like if you're just building stuff for yourself and you're doing little bits and pieces and you don't care about tracking changes, then this is not what it's for, right? What it's for is when you're building serious, develop solutions, you're developing serious solutions, and you need to track every change that happened, and you need to be able to roll back those changes. You need to be able to track what multiple people are doing to your large data model. This is the scenarios that you're talking about. Okay, we head back to our repository, and now we can see that this is the most recent. Said this is an update that has been deleted, and then this line was changed to this is another update to the file. And so you can see we're tracking those changes as we go. Awesome. So how does this work with Power BI then? So how do we get our files now into our Power BI? So we've got a budget versus actual file, which is not currently saved in that format. What we want to do is we want to save this. And one of the things I'm going to do first, I'm just going to turn off an option. I'm interested to see what the difference is, but just so that we're thinking. So I've got some preview settings turned on at the moment. And one of those preview features, just making sure that it was turned off, is this one. Power BI project save option. We need this. This is what we want. And I've also got this one turned off, which is store semantic model using Tyndall format. So we're going to leave that for now, but we might play with that another time. Okay, so now let's save this file that we've been playing around with. And I'll just delete this guy. And we'll save it now in our proper format, which is our PBIP format. Okay, and I have to find that repository name. Control-C. I'm going to delete hello.txt. We don't need it. I'm going to browse and open this one. And we've got budget.actual down here. And we need to change the file type to be PBIP. So you can see we've got that option now. So it changes the extension. And we go budget versus actual, that will do. And we'll hit save. So what happens in our folder now is that we get a bunch of stuff. We get a dot report, a dot semantic model, a dot PBIP file, and the git ignore thing is a part of GitHub. And this is a list of files that you shouldn't sync, right? It's basically what that means, right? We use that in our Git repository thing, and this hidden.git thing. Is that preference against Tyndall for reliability and maturity issues, or because it's not necessary for teaching PBIP? Yeah, it's maturity mostly. The reality is I don't know what's going to happen if I enable Tyndall, and it might cause issues that send me down a rabbit hole that I don't want to deal with right now. Yeah. But Tyndall looks really good, but yeah, we're not up to that yet. I think is kind of where we're up to. Okay, so what's in these folders? So we get some static resources. We got this report.json. We've got a definition file. So we've got a bunch of files now that are the definition of our report. And this is what PBIP does: is it breaks up, instead of it being like a a big blob binary file, which is a PBIX file, which is everything all zipped together. PBIP project files, and now separates all the files out, and it saves them in these JSON formats that we can now do those diff comparisons on what happened to the file when we're doing this kind of version control and type scenario, right? So let's see how that works in practice. So we'll open up our GitHub desktop. Look, a whole bunch of new files just appeared because we've done that. Okay, so I said created the budget versus actual report. Initial commit. Committing that up to our main branch. Now we don't have to push immediately, right? We can make changes now. So what if I go in here, create a new table and put a new text box in here. This is a change. Hit save. That's now a Power BI project file. You can see at the top it says Power BI project as well, which means you know. We can go back into GitHub desktop now. We can see that one file was changed. The definition of report.json got changed, right? And it added 2 new objects. These are the objects, right? This one we'll probably find is some kind of text box, and this is probably some kind of table visual, or the other way around, okay? So now our changes in Power BI are reflected in the text of our JSON file, our report.json file. If we were to make changes to the model, that would be reflected in the definition of the model file, in the model definition file. Okay, so these different files have different, so this is the model definition file here, model.bin. Okay, diagram layout.json. There's this JSON file that describes the layout of the model. If we go back up, if we look at the report.json, which is the one we just changed, that describes everything on the page. Okay, and so these files are describing all of the different every time we make a change, these files are being updated, and then Power BI is able to see the differences there. Okay, so we can publish our changes now. We're going to do a new commit. Added a empty table to the commit that up. So now we've got 2 commits that need to be pushed. And so we can push origin, that'll push it up to our repository in the Power BI, in the DevOps service, okay? And so the last piece of this puzzle is say, well, how do we get it from DevOps service into Power BI? Like it needs to go into a workspace, right? So we want the changes to be reflected in the workspace as well. So on like the 28th of May, so only a few days ago, they introduced a new way to do this, which is cool. So we'll have a look at it and see if it works. I'll just open Power BI / Fabric, I guess. I'm just opening it on my other screen. I'll bring it over in a sec. We should see those changes though reflected in our repository. So let's see what happens here if I hit refresh. Now we've got a bunch of different stuff, which is very cool. Okay. Okay, I've logged into Power BI and I'm in the Fabric Friday workspace. And this is a production workspace right now, although probably should say dev, and it's on a Fabric capacity, so it's got a diamond next to it. Everything that we're doing here right now will work on any premium capacity. So you can have a premium per user, a regular premium capacity, a P capacity, or an F SKU like a Fabric capacity. This will work for all of them. typically the reason why it's all premium is because like you're typically not doing this unless you're like a BI development team type thing. This is not something for individual users really. All right, we've got budget versus actual here. I'm going to delete these reports though, because we want to use this new way of doing things. We haven't done task flows yet either. We've got to do that at some point. Okay, over here in workspace settings, which was a little cog, I clicked on the top. If you go down here, it says Git integration. Right here, click on that. Now I'm logged into Azure DevOps here with my account, and so I can select my organization, which was Metro Holographics. I can select the project, which was our Fabric Friday project, which is here. I can select the repository, which is our Fabric Friday repository, and I select a branch, which is the main branch. Okay, now what a branch does, and it's interesting, I'll give you a link to John Kursky's, he did a presentation on this at the Calgary Power BI user group just the other day. But he says, for branches, like you could have a dev branch and a test branch and a main branch. And I'm like, oh, I don't know if that's how you're supposed to use branches. So my understanding of what you do with branches, so you have a main branch and then you have a feature, right? So let's say someone says to you, your boss says to you, hey, I want you to add a new report page to the budget and actual report. So I want you to start working on that page, and then I want you to commit it back to the main branch when everything's ready to go. So then you fork off a second branch and you start working on that feature, and then you might want to test that feature. And so then you would sync a workspace to that feature, right? But and then you would bring it back into the main branch. But then all of that would get then published into dev, which would then get published into and then you would run automatic testing on it. And then you would, once testing passed, you would publish it into test. And then test is UAT. So then your users, your small group of users test it, they give it the tick. And then when they've given it the tick, it goes into prod. And then that means it's ready for wider consumption. So a branch, in my understanding, is that you would branch off features and then bring them back in, but you wouldn't necessarily use them for dev, test, prod scenarios. But I'd be interested to get feedback if anyone else had other thoughts about that. But that's my understanding of how to use branches. Okay, so we're going to sync the main branch, and then it says Git folder, but I don't think we have a folder. So we'll just say connect and sync. And now, with the demo gods on my side, hopefully the contents of that repository will start to sink in, and it is into our workspace. Okay, so it's syncing the semantic model, and it's syncing the report, and now they're both synced. So now we've completed that end to end, like we sort of did with OneDrive. We've now completed an end to end development pipeline that takes our changes as we make them in Power BI Desktop. We hit the save button. We then commit those changes and put in what we did as a part of our development team. And then they get pushed up to the repository. When they get pushed up, then they get synced to our Power BI workspace, and they become available for testing or whatever we want to do. Okay. And so this is the next generation, if you like, of that idea of being able to create continuous integration. So as we make changes, those changes are then committed. And so I think last week Kirsty was here and she was saying, well, what if I make a bunch of changes, but I don't necessarily want to save them all at once? This is what we now have available to us, is that we can make several changes locally, but then only commit once we've said. That's why it's called a commit. We're now committing our changes to be pushed up to the production environment. Does this work for any input mode, import, direct query, composite model, etc.? Does it work for live connection reports too? Yes, it works for everything, I think. Not 100% on live connection reports. I'm pretty it's anything that you can edit in Power BI Desktop, it will work for, is the short of it. Yeah, PBIP is equivalent for all connection types. My understanding is that it works for all connection types. Yeah. Okay, so now we've got a proper continuous development pipeline that we can update our things. So our project is starting to look much more serious. Okay. So for the remainder of the time, I don't want to spend too much time. I don't want to spend the whole time talking about just Git stuff. Let's actually start building. And then as we go, we can mature this up because we want to set up that testing using query view. We're going to do that. We're going to then hopefully automate that testing so that we don't have to run the tests, but actually the system will run the tests every time we go to publish to prod. And this is what we want to start doing, automated testing. So it's this idea of test-driven development is going to then mature into this automating that piece as well. So we are gonna get to that piece over the next, I don't know how long it'll take us to get there, but I want to now switch gears a little bit and start talking a little bit about what are we actually going to build and some of the challenges associated with kind of modeling this kind of modeling income statements and profit and loss, and how we're actually going to build this sort of best possible version of profit and loss. So I did a bit of research during the week. I watched a few interesting YouTube videos, and there was a great session from SQL Bits in 2023 on profit and loss. I'll find it now and I'll put the link in the chat because none of this work is my work. This is all like all the stuff that I'm showing you on. I mean, you know, like Microsoft has set up the PBIP stuff, but all of this stuff I learned about the CI/CD stuff is all from John Kursky's blog. So we'll make sure that you go and check out his stuff and give him love on that. And then the second one, guy's name is literally fallen out of my brain, but I will find it right now. I'll find you this session on P&L, and I think this is the beginning of an interesting discussion around how to model P&L data, because there's some interesting things here. Okay. Bob Duffy. He's another MVP. He's from the UK. You might be familiar with his work already. He's been around for a long time. But I'll give you the link in the chat to his financial statements session on YouTube, and I'll also give you the link to his GitHub repository, which was the one that I had cloned in my Git here. If we go to financial modeling, this is his repository that has a bunch of really cool, like all the stuff from that presentation, including a sample PBIX file, AdventureWorks database with accounting data in it, and a bunch of other stuff, which is all useful for doing these financial statements. So shout out to Bob Duffy. He's done some really great work here. And so make sure you go check his stuff out as well. Okay. So let's talk about some of the challenges here. So let's actually start. Now that we've got this synced, I want to start actually making changes to my file, right? Because I actually want to build this thing. So what do we have? So from our friend Bob, we've got a few bits and pieces. He in that thing that in his financial repository, he's got a bunch of sample data from our favorite database, the AdventureWorks database. But this is a different one. Normally you do sales stuff in AdventureWorks. This is actually the financial side from AdventureWorks 2017. Okay, so he's brought in like a GL, a general ledger, and he's brought in some accounts and some other bits and pieces and scenarios, and he's got all of these Excel spreadsheets that he's extracted from AdventureWorks. But we can actually set up I'll probably by next week I'll have set up the AdventureWorks SQL, and we'll run it directly from the transactional system rather than running it from Excel files. But we'll use this today for just demonstration purposes. Okay, so what is a GL like? When we're talking about P&Ls, we're always talking about we're doing it from the GL, from the general ledger, right? So what is that? What does a GL typically look like? So lucky for us, we've got our friend Bob has done a good job of bringing some data in. So let's actually get some data for the first time in this report. We've only done refresh date time, so we're going to get some Excel data. It's going to be inside GitHub, inside financial modeling, inside downloads, inside files. And it's going to be is it CSV file? I think it was CSV. Sorry, let me try again. Get data. CSV. GitHub, financial modeling, downloads, files. Here we go. We've got transactions and transactions basic. I'll just open transactions for now. Hopefully this looks right. Looks pretty good. Okay, so we've got finance key, a date key, an organization key, a department key, a scenario key, an account key, and amount key. This is now different GLs have different structures, different ERP systems and accounting systems will have slightly different versions of these types of structures, but a journal or a GL is going to have something that looks pretty similar to this as your source data for this type of reporting. So we'll have a look at it. Looks pretty straightforward. Nothing too crazy in here. Date key, organizational key. I'll bring in our organization, our department, our scenarios, our accounts, because we'll need to join those to this. So let's do that. I think they come in as Excel workbooks. Accounts, yep. What's on sheet one? Looks right. He hasn't made it as a table. He should make it a table. See, let's get to creates it as a sheet one now, but that's okay. Bring in accounts, bring in our organizations. And these would all be, theoretically, these are all tables that just live inside your transactional systems, right? So you'll have an accounts table that's got a list of all of your different accounts with your account keys. It might have a parent-child relationship, and so we can talk about that. This is one of the challenges that we'll start to run into, right? Is that we need to figure out how to model this properly. And I do have Bob's thing here, and I'll show you how he modeled it. And I think he's as good as I've ever seen. I think there is a way we can improve it, and we'll talk about why. But let's just look at the. I'll just leave transactions, accounts, and organizations for now. We'll just load those, and we'll see if we can just get them to join. Right. Look at that! It automatically joined them for us. I love it when Power BI does this. First thing we have to do is check that it didn't get it wrong. So we check this relationship. That's a many. That's a one. That looks correct. So let's see what it's joined on account key, and this is the accounts table joining to the transactions table. That looks correct. So I don't feel the need to delete that. On this side, we've got a one to many, which is correct. It's a one-way relationship. It goes from organization key down to organization key. So hopefully that's correct as well. All right, so we can make a P&L, right? Let's just don't we just take our transactions and put in the transaction amount and then put in like the account name? There's probably an account name, isn't there? Account description. Is that it? Or is there another one? Maybe that's it. Make it a table. Perfect. All right. We didn't do date. So there's probably a date on the transactions, isn't there? There is. Let's create it. Oh, let's bring in the date table because it feels weird not having a date table. He's got one in his model here, so I'll just grab it. Calendar. Oh, there's a view date. He actually made a table. What's the difference between that and that? I'll use this. It looks better. Straight load. Oh, I never clicked the note. Oh, named range. Thanks for Win. I knew you were going to. I was like, that's not a table, but no one will correct me. Win's here. Okay, so we've got a named range, view date, attached to our transactions. And then with our date table attached, we can just bring in like the month or something, can't we? fiscal month, fiscal period. Add that as a slicer. What's our fiscal period? Do we have a year? Yeah, let's fiscal year. Oh, why do you keep turning into a number? Slicer, style, vertical list. There we go. Beautiful. Get rid of that one. We'll just use fiscal year. There you go. There's my, so if you were to present this to your accountant, you wouldn't last long because like yeah, it's got all of your accounts and it's got the numbers are probably okay, then changing at least, which is a positive. I don't think is there numbers or there's only numbers for 2010, 11, 12, 13, and that's it. Okay. But that's not what an income statement looks like, right? That's not what and guaranteed, and I don't know how many accounting people we have on here, but they're very funny about what order the things need to go in, right? And they also need to do some pretty weird stuff. I'm worried that it doesn't balance to zero. Yeah, maybe. Yes, that's the other thing about this this source data is that it doesn't balance to zero because our negative numbers are also put in as positives, I think. So if we look at expenses, for example, you'll have to multiply your debits by -1. That's what Shelley is just saying in the chat now. That's right. So where everything is represented as a positive number. And so there's a bit of work to do to turn this raw transactional data, which is obviously handled in the transactional system, I mean the fictional AdventureWorks transactional system, but this isn't uncommon for an accounting or an ERP software to spit all of its data out in positive numbers, even though they're negative, and then it handles it internally, whether it's for negative or positive, right? So we need to handle, so that's one of the challenges that we're going to have modeling this. The other challenge is to make an income statement, we need to do things like calculate EBIT and we have roll-ups, custom roll-ups, and particular numbers that get calculated on an income statement. So let's have a look at some income statements and see how far away we are from this kind of thing. I'll just use Bob's one. So this is what a real P&L would look like, right? You would have potentially your gross sales, which is made up of your trade sales and your intercompany sales, less your discounts, and your discounts are represented as a negative number, right? Then you're going to have like roll-ups like your net invoice sales, which is all of this minus your discounts, your returns and adjustments. So then your net sales is your net invoice sales minus your returns and adjustments, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? Oh, Michael Schultz has got a bunch of awesome links there for on financial statements. Yeah, and this is an endless thing, and we'll talk a little bit about how we're going to present all of this. The thing that I like about this approach is that there's a couple of nice features of Bob Duffy's report that I think financial people will really like. One of them is that you can change the units. So you can go in here and you can change the statement unit, and you can go, I actually represent this in millions, and it changes it all into millions, right? And then this changes up here to selected millions. That's a nice feature. So we should have that, right? Because people will like that. If I change it to thousands, it changes. And there's actually a really subtle thing, and he goes through it in the video that I linked, but he also changes the number of decimal places based on what you've got selected as well, right? And so if I leave it as its default, it might not, yeah, I don't think he's got it in this version of the report. It looks like they're always 2 decimal places. But in this version, like let's say when you're on zeros, you might want it so that you don't show the 0.62 because like it's too precise. It just that's going to be that's going to be a preference of whoever you're creating the report for. So the other interesting thing here is he's got EBITDA and EBIT and the percentages all in line, which is actually, this is where things get to be weird, right? Because this is like a measure. So that's a measure. and these are like columns. And so you've got columns and measures all in the same, represented in the same table, right? And we'll talk a little bit about how we do that, right? And I don't know if we won't have time today because we'll go more in detail about how we model all of this correctly, and then some of my ideas about what he's doing differently. But we'll go through the features of what he's got, and then we'll talk about the specifics later. But so we've got measures and we've got things in line. And then you've got the challenge of when you do this type of stuff is that this is currently represented as 0.24, but it's a percentage, right? So this is a percentage. So how do we get this to represent as 24%? Because that's what the customer will want. The customer will want. Okay. And so income statements, even though they're like this kind of old school kind of tabular format, and it's so easy to do in Excel. Why is it easy? Why isn't it easy in Power BI? They're not easy to necessarily. It's not intuitive to replicate them. So you need to do some modeling tricks to make all of this stuff happen. Now, the other thing it's really easy to build one that's super slow if you calculate all of this stuff out in DAX. If you try and generate this table in DAX, or you're doing some weird DAX to make this happen, it will run super slow because you're just doing too much calculation. So we want to, particularly if you're dealing with large GL, right? GL can be a massive file. And so, so we've got challenges around how do we get this into the format that people are going to like, and then also how do we ensure that it's got all the measures and it's got everything that we need. And luckily now, in the old days, this is a nightmare. But now we've got things like calculation groups, we've got field parameters. These are things that actually really help with this piece. So it'll be fun to go through using all of those, some of those newer features to make sure that we can do this stuff too. The other thing that and Bob doesn't do that. He says at the beginning of his example, he's not a data visualization guy, right? He's all about the model. He's not about the visual, and that's kind of reflected in his report here. It's not the world's prettiest report, but it does the job. It works really well, and it's fast. And so the model is actually, and I've purposely not shown you the model yet because we're going to talk about that in a sec. But the model is the important thing in this report. But what I want to do is that we'll then expand on that, and we want to bring in like IBCS reporting standards. We want to make sure that we're doing the best possible version of an income statement that we can for our solution, because this is our super official. It's got change tracking in it. It's going to have CI/CD. It's going to have P&L. It's going to have IBCS standards. It's going to be all the whiz bang things in one. So we're going to spend a few weeks building this, and we want to make sure we do it right. Awesome. So there's lots of difficult things. Now there's some other interesting things, interesting features of the way that he's got this report. Another one that he's got here, and I don't know if we can do this is this on like page 1? Maybe we can just create a thing here. Let me have a look. What does scenario say? He's got some scenario stuff. So this is the EBITDA P&L. So this is what I was going to show you anyway, but he's got actually a slicer for it, but he's got it on 2 different pages here. So this is the P&L statement, which has these headings, right? And this is the EBITDA statement, which has a different set. So he set it up so that you can select a different set of columns and get a different report, which is actually another really common request from accounting and finance teams, right? Because you might have the one, so this P&L statement, this might be your standard regulatory one that you send out to external parties, and it's got all of the information. And then you might have an EBITDA one that is like a cut down version that is you might send to the stock market or something. And then you might have one that you use internally. And you've got different versions of an income statement that you're potentially going to need to create. And so having a way to flexibly change is actually a really good feature of the way that he's modeled this as well. So there's lots of interesting features that we need to include in our final model. And so the way that he kind of achieves this, and now we'll look at the model, because I don't know about this. Let's have a look. All right. So he's got his GL down here. He's got his GL. And that, quite correctly, it's a fact table. And it literally has just measures in it, like and keys. It's pretty good. It's pretty good as a fact. If you were thinking of it from a star schema type view, it's a fact table. It's pretty good. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. Actually, maybe it is perfect. I don't know if the account type is in here as a text file. So maybe that's not. Let's have a look at the actual table. Is account type? Yeah. So account type, it has text in it. We forgive him that. We forgive him that. But that's pretty good. Everything else, pretty good. Okay. It's joined to account by a one-to-many relationship. I'm happy with that. And then you've got account here. Account is a dimension table. It's, it should have a bunch of information about accounts, and it does. It's a wide table. So that's great. It's what we want to see. Lots of stuff. Some interesting things here, like this account path. So it's a parent-child relationship in your accounts. And so he's had to resolve that by using the path, getting the path and mapping it out. That's really good and clever and annoying to have to do, but it's one of those things. This is why income statements are not as easy as they first appear, right? You need to account for all of this weird stuff. And he's got level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, which is his hierarchy of accounts, so that you can have it's a ragged hierarchy, right? You've got account might have 2 things under it, or it might have 4 things under it, or it might have 2, and then those 2 have 2 things. So it's different for every account type, and you need to be able to account for all of that. You need to, that's just the nature of the way people like to look at these P&L statements. They're a standard report. Everybody uses them literally in the whole world. You have to be able to do it. Okay, so that's why he's got that, which is great. Okay, no problem so far. Still a star schema. I'm happy. And now we hit the many-to-many. Okay, now he's done this many-to-many pattern, and many of you will have seen or have attended, like Marco Russo came and did his session on many-to-manys at the Melbourne Power BI User Group. I know he's done that session around the world. For lots of you might have seen it. And where he talks about, well, you should never have a many-to-many is basically what there's almost no scenario where you need a many-to-many. So why do we have a many-to-many in this case? This is maybe the only time in my whole life that I will accept this many-to-many. I'm not sure. Even now, I'm desperately think that I can do this better. And I think it has to do with maybe making the fact table significantly bigger, but yeah, let me think about that. So he's created a bridge table. This is the bridge in the middle. He's got a statement on the left and he's got an account on the right. So he uses statement to filter the accounts that are in that statement. So statement is basically a report type. That's why I couldn't find it earlier. He's changed the name to statement. So that's this table here. So I think if I'm not, see how he says report is P&L here? That'll come from the statement table. It does. Awesome. So I can change this. I want this to be the EBITDA report. And look, it changes the columns on your report. Change it back to our profit and loss. Actually, I want this to be a balance statement. And now it changes into a balance statement. Like, that's cool functionality. And that's why he has the many-to-many, right? Is because each report type, the different report types, the balance statement, the EBITDA, the P&L, the cash flow statement, they have a different set of accounts associated with them. And there's many reports have many accounts. So you need to be able to be flexible like that. Where this, I'm not sure about it, is where it comes into the way he does his calculations for things like EBITDA. I think there's a better way, maybe, and I'm going to investigate it this week. But he's got a many to many where I can select my report here. For each report. There's a mapping table that maps between reports and the accounts, and then it selects the appropriate accounts here, and then we do the calculations. And the advantage of this is he gives control to the accounts team or the finance team over what's in what report. So it's actually just an Excel spreadsheet. This is just an Excel spreadsheet that people can edit. Unless you don't trust them, he says, and then they can't edit it. You give it to somebody who's responsible. So that's probably this Excel here. So you might publish this Excel to SharePoint. Michael said the fact table gets really big if you don't have a bridging table. Yeah, and I don't know, I'm like, oh, do I turn it into anyway? You're on the right. You're on my wavelength, Michael. I know you know what I'm talking about, but the question is, should we do it or not? Anyway, I'll have to think about that. We're not talking about that much. It could be bad. Anyway, I'll ponder that this week. All right. So this is something that he publishes to SharePoint, or he gives to the accounts team, right? And they come in here and they say, for report number 1, line number 1, that's going to be it gives it a section, and then what's the gross sales, and it's a sum, and it's in the P&L report. And so then those things get repeated. So the balance sheet report has this set of tables, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? Which is great. I actually really love this feature as well, because I always want to push back the responsibility of managing these things away from the report developers. The report developers should have nothing to do with how these reports are structured and these types of things. You should always try and get this back into the finance team. The last thing you want is the finance team ringing you every day to make updates to their silly reports, right? And we built KPI system. This is very similar pattern to what you do when you build a KPI system as well, is that you want to give people control over the structure of the KPI systems. And so they say, yeah, we've got this KPI and that KPI, and it's almost exactly this. There are KPIs in this actually. And so it's very similar. You have these ragged hierarchies, you've got this crazy stuff that people want to build, and you're trying to give them control over it without corrupting the model. So I really like this, and I think so it's definitely worth checking out. If you're interested in income statements and how to build them, then check out Bob's session. And next week, what we'll be doing is we'll be applying some of this stuff. We'll rebuild it, and then we're going to publish it up using our CI/CD pipeline into our official production environment. Then we'll talk a little bit more. We'll come back once we get our head around that. We'll come back into testing and how we actually turn this into a proper full-on solution. A flag column for each report type in the account table, but then you'll be relying on DAX to display the correct values. Yeah, so you'll see if you watch Bob's session, he's very anti-DAX. He wants there to be 0 DAX, and he gets it to the point where there's not much, but there's still some DAX. And I guess my hypothesis on this is that if we went the big fact table route, you could actually reduce the DAX to almost 0, other than simple sums, which is what you want in these scenarios. So it would still be performant, even though the fact table is really big. It would be extremely performant because you're doing such simple DAX on it. But I will play around with that during the week, and we can worry about that. Unfortunately, we've run out of time for today, so that's all we could talk about. But hopefully you learned a little bit. We spoke a little bit about how to set up a CI/CD pipeline using PBIP format, and then syncing it to your workspace, which I think is a really cool little pattern, really good for enterprise development teams, and something that you should explore more. And we can integrate automatic testing into that. We'll talk about that in the future. And then the second half was talking about probably, I think the way to model for income statements. I'd be really interested if you've got a different way of doing that that you think would be more performant and have less DAX, and also gives more control over to the finance team. As far as I've seen so far, this is about as good, if not as good as you can do in terms of giving them all of that different functionality, the flexibility combined with performance. Cool. That's it for today. Thanks, folks. It's great to see you all. Hopefully, we'll see you again next week. We'll be covering more of the same. We'll do another iteration on our little report. Hopefully, we can get to the point where we can get the first version of stuff going through. But appreciate you all. Great to have you along. And yeah, we'll see you next week.